Welcome to Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. Now, we believe wise investing starts with a plan, and your investments may have merit, relevance to a time and place, but this all depends on you, your objectives, and your goals. My name is Seth Cressman, and I'm here with Ben Brayshaw and John Ryder, and we're all planners and partners with Brayshaw Financial Group. Good morning, guys.
Good morning, Seth. How you doing, man?
Good morning, Seth.
We're glad to have you listening to Money on Tap. And if you're looking to sit down with an advisor and start making some of the right steps towards your financial goals, we welcome the opportunity to do that with you. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. You can also find us at Facebook /3D Investing. Now today, I am really excited about our topic. We're going to be discussing something that's important for everyone in our listening audience. And if you're an investor, then you are, in essence, a planner. You're planning for the future. You're planning for the days when you no longer have income coming in from your job, and you're basically creating your own income out of the history of your savings and your own planning.
Exactly, Seth. You know, and planning for the future doesn't only apply to people that are looking forward to retirement, but it also is, or should be, a very important thing for folks that have already retired. If you're 70 years old out there in our audience today, and you have been retired for the last 6 or 8 years, it's really important to make sure that you have a handle on getting your income to keep up with the rising costs of living in retirement, because those are costs that are certainly escalating each and every year.
Yeah, John. I mean, they're just not escalating. I mean, people are living longer. I mean,
sure.
I heard a statistic that a married couple over 65, that there's over a 25% chance one of them will live to 100 years old.
Wow. Hey, do you guys know that the oldest man in the world died yesterday? 113 years old. He lived in the same village in Spain for all of his 113 years. Never lived anywhere else. But, well, I know we're not all going to live to 113, but we certainly have to plan for our clients when it comes to planning for longevity planning is what we need to do. Yeah,
I think the thing is and we're going to get into this deep today, I think,
sure,
which I'm really actually excited about, but the differences between, you know, how an advisor thinks about planning and how the investor thinks about planning. And there's that gap. We call it, you know, bridging the gap, and that's kind of the title of our show today. But trying to bring that correlation of those two trains of thought together is the ultimate goal of an advisor, is to help that client both meet their goals and expectations and, you know, cross that bridge. Because honestly, if you don't, there's a huge disconnect, and that's something I think we want to really dive in today.
Well, before we get into the weeds on bridging that retirement gap, it's time for Money in the News.
So, interesting article today that we're going to be discussing is out of it's a Reuters article, and it was written about the governors of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut said that they're forming a multi-state coalition against a new federal tax bill and will file legal action challenging the constitutionality of the legislation signed in December. The bill unfairly impacts their states with its repeal of state and local tax deductibility, the first double taxation in U.S. history, the governor said during a phone call with reporters.
I don't know if I'd write that off as the first double taxation.
First ever, Ben.
First ever. No one's ever been double taxed before. It's like
so Andrew Cuomo.
What's a sales tax after you pay income tax?
Hey, they said it must be true.
Hey, talk about New York too. Talk about what quadruple taxing.
The ultimate sinners of double taxation is New York.
Yeah. So the governor Andrew Cuomo said that there are very strong arguments that the bill violates states' rights as well as the Equal Protection Clause in the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, so let's break down the irony of this article, because, you know, John, in reading this article when you sent it to me, I just started laughing because, you know, the Democratic side is always stating how they're for the small guy, the little guy, this, that, and the other thing. The bill that the lawsuit they're bringing is for the wealthier people. I mean, this is targeting people who, you know, pay exorbitant amounts of property or income tax. That means you have to make enough money to get there, right? And I get that the number's somewhat low and that less states are affected, but New Hampshire's affected. We're not suing anybody. And but all these guys
that we know of,
and not to mention that Jerry Brown over in the governor of California is being roped in to try to get involved in this and so forth.
Whenever he's involved, that makes me suspect something's going on there.
I mean, it's like we've got the 4 Democratic leads on this, and then one of their arguments is that this whole bill, the SALT as they call it, decision,
SALT provision,
the SALT provision, the $10,000 limitation on that and so forth. They believe the argument is that Trump intentionally built this to attack their states. Now, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but when you look at the increase in the automatic deductions your people are going to get, they're all doubling. They're all going from 6 to 12 basically on the individual side, and 12 to 24. We went over that on another show. I mean, there's there's gives and takes everywhere. Does it unfairly treat the wealthy? Yeah, but haven't we been doing that and been encouraged to do that by the Democratic side repetitively over and over again? So I think the irony of this is pretty funny.
So the new tax bill that Trump signed into law introduced a cap of $10,000 on deductions for state and local income property taxes, and that's pretty much what they're complaining about.
Well, check this out. So to continue this on, the last line of this article talks about how they're all trying to figure out with this new cap on the local tax deductions, they're talking about charitable donations as a workaround in this area.
Oh, boy.
And so, this would, if this was on, I mean, if this was the Republican side doing this, they would be all over this. They would be like, look, it's just trying to scam the tax code again. It would be it's so one-sided. It's pretty funny. But this was a good article, John. I like this one.
Ben, you were talking about this is really more going to affect the rich. Basically, that's what the Democrats are protecting. Well, if we're going to talk about the rich, the super rich, I want to talk to you about the ultra rich. Now, I'm sure, Seth, this is what you're planning for your retirement. Ben, I'm sure you're probably not far behind here. But there's an article out there in Bloomberg that is entitled "A Cruise Ship Called the World is a Luxury Home at Sea for the Super Rich." Now, Ben, this is a pretty fascinating article because it talks about how if you want, typically what we do is we help people plan for their retirement. Some of our clients might have a second home. Some of them may not. Some of them may plan to be snowbirds and go down to Florida for their retirement. Well, these guys that buy into this ship, now there's only 165 residences on the ship. And there's 12 floors, and there's every kind of luxury you can imagine. But when you go on this cruise ship, this is a cruise ship that you don't just you don't get on in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and get off in Miami. This is a cruise ship where you actually stay on the boat, and your residence is there. You can stay on there 12 months out of the year if you want. And it is not a cheap way to retire. This is for the uber rich. So if you have between $2 million and $15 million that you're willing to plunk down on your either between 400 square feet and 3,500 square feet, you can do that if you want.
I like the note here, Seth, where it talks about how the people who are super rich, they're going from these expansive houses down to like 1,000 to 1,400 square feet. Yeah, right. And like trying to figure out how one of the biggest complications is trying to figure out how to fit into these places.
Yeah, one guy said he was closet constrained. Yes, poor guy. Yeah, but it's funny.
Yeah, I think that's about what I could get in on this with would be the broom closet. And probably like the lower, the 13th level where they let me out. They let me up like once a month for 15 minutes.
This is a version of camping for these people. I mean, think about it. Most of their closets were probably bigger than the rooms they're now purchasing as their permanent residence.
For sure.
I wonder how many of them are just like kind of placeholders that they maybe kind of joined the ship for a month or two out of the year, and then the rest of the month the rest of the year they're just kind of doing whatever else they do.
And that may be the case, but it's interesting with only 165 residences. Some of them
it's not a lot of people.
It's not a lot of people, and so as a result, those 165 residences, and some people have multiple residences on there. Okay, but they have a choice. It's a board of directors that votes where they're going. And so they'll vote, yes, we're going to go down, we're going to go to the Caymans, and then we're going to go here, and we're going to go there. And so it's a big vote, and they have it all pre-planned ahead of time. But they it comes into port once, so it's running 365 days a year, but it comes into port once every 3 years for repairs and that type of thing and upgrades, and then it heads off again. And it's been very successful. They used to have it where they would actually have people that were, like you and me that would cruise for a month or so.
Not like you and me.
No, but they'd cruise for maybe a week or two, and then they'd be off the cruise ship. But they just found it didn't work very well, and so they decided they're going to make this for owners only. So if you want to buy a residence here, actually you can look up online, and I don't think there's any available right now, but when it comes due, it'll just be like buying any other piece of real estate.
One person had 72 hours. He didn't get to even look at it. He had to buy it at he had barely a minute to even buy it.
Yeah. That's Trevor Rowe, chairman of Rothschild Australia. Fewer than 72 hours to decide to buy a 2-bedroom unit in 2012. So 1,391 square feet is what he.
Do you think he got a window?
I think they all get windows. I don't know.
Think about 165 people, Seth. 165 people living together on a boat. That's worse than a desert island. And getting along.
Hey, well, so 644 feet is how long the vessel is. It has 12 decks, 2 pools, full-size tennis court, a golf simulator with an on-call pro, a Pilates studio, a billiard table that's cantilevered to accommodate the ship's sway, wood-paneled library, has grocery stores on board, 6 restaurants, you name it. Oh, by the way, residents can swing by the for-profit art gallery and grab a $50,000 Picasso etching of a Minotaur on their way to the 7,000 square foot spa. So, it's a place that I can see myself being accustomed to.
Can you imagine buying one of these things? And hey, honey, I got a surprise for you. I bought this. And she looks at you and she says, I get seasick.
Yeah.
You better know your spouse better than that.
How do the grandkids come and visit? Or, where do we do our holidays?
Seth, that is covered too. Now, they do have these smaller residences where they can accommodate guests just for a short period of time, no longer than a week. And it's a very in the waiting list. I mean, there's a waiting list for all this, but it's very specific as far as how long the guests can stay and how many can come and stay. So it's a fascinating thing. And
for some people, that might be like that extra level of control over how long the in-laws can stay.
That's right.
Or how long,
That's right.
Or you can put your
extended
in-laws
family
on
can
one of these
visit.
boats and let it set sail. See you in a couple of years.
You could do that too. I know we would not do that to our
No,
in-laws
it's
because
not-
we all have great in-laws here.
I
on
was
the
actually
show.
just reading that out of the article.
Yes. Okay. So there's one guy who owns a 72-foot yacht in the Bahamas, and he keeps a residence in Florida too. He says, you know what? You sail to places you could never go, even on your own yacht. Even on my own 72-foot yacht, I couldn't go there. And you know what's cool too? This is just an extra thing, Seth, in case you were thinking of pulling the plug on this. But they actually will have like Nobel laureates that will come and give lectures on the area that they're going to visit. So if you're going to the fjords of Norway, you'll have some expert that has maybe scaled some of the cliffs there, that kind of thing. They'll have like Bishop Desmond Tutu's Archbishop, one of the people that was underneath him. They'll have him give a lecture. So all kinds of stuff you can get if you want it, if you can afford it. But
So
$1 million a year.
If this is an idea that's really running and it's operating, I would actually be curious to see who is looking in this market and going to develop this market. Kind of like there's over 55 and older home areas. Have you?
Oh yeah,
you guys
sure. We have
those.
them.
I'm sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I'd be curious to see like how many more of these are coming online and what happens to the supply demand piece there. But fascinating.
Well, the owners, Seth, just to go a little further, the owners on this boat, they actually split up all the different costs of maintenance and this and that. So if you're buying into it, they require that you have a minimum net worth of $10 million after you have made your purchase so that you're able to handle all the different expenses that come along the way. Because I can imagine for a boat that's cruising 365 days a year, there's probably a couple of expenses that come up.
We're at Drift in the middle of the Pacific. Hey, I got a question on this, and I don't think it's in the article because I didn't see anything. But when do they make you get off the boat?
Oh, there are excursions that you can go on all the time.
I'm talking about
When
you
do they
get
make you go?
old and ill and
Well, I think it's like any other residence, but that's another concern. So let's say that you're having some heart issues, and let's face it, when you hit 55, 65 years old, which is the average age, 55 to 65 is the average age of someone buying. You would think, you think about what many seniors are saying, our clients are saying, wow, I'll see if I can fit you in, John, for our appointment between our doctor's appointment and our dentist appointment. And I mean, there's a lot of appointments that you have when you get into your retirement years.
Yeah, I can see this being fun for like a few years.
Yes.
Or something like that. But after that, it's like, I want to get out of there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's it for Money on the News. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com.
On this edition of our Money on Tap Cliff Notes, John Ryder shares one of the more unusual questions posed to him by a client about an insurance policy.
The most bizarre question that I have ever gotten was from an assigned client, and this guy had a life insurance policy through the company in which I work. This was not a policy, again, that I had sold him, but he said he wanted to know what the suicide clause was on the policy. I didn't know the client, but it was kind of unsettling. I was kind of like, that's kind of weird. He didn't really want to chit-chat at all. He didn't want to really talk much, but he just asked me politely what it was. Now, if people don't know this, there's typically a 2-year clause in the policy, which basically means if you attempt to take your life in the first 2 years of the policy doesn't even pay out, but it will only pay the premium back that was paid in the policy. So I don't remember what my exact conversation with him was, but in looking up his policy, he had it for a number of years and it would have paid out. So I think I said something to him about it, but there may be other solutions for him to consider is kind of what I was saying. To my knowledge, there's never a death claim on the policy, but it was really a pretty unusual question.
Thanks for joining us for this Cliff Notes edition of Money on Tap, with great tips from the pros in three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. Now here's more Money on Tap with Seth, Ben, and John.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing brokerage, insurance, and fee-based planning. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Now, today we have had a lot of fun talking about some of the Money in the News latest headlines that were sometimes we get a little bit caught up in those and spend a little bit more time than we planned, but it was a lot of fun. But today we're going to be talking about bridging the retirement gap and some different areas of what some of the pitfalls of retirement planning can look like, in whether that's not planning for or looking into, medical expenses or, fully funding your retirement and income and possible loss of income due to market fluctuation or whatever it might be. But these can be some of the gaps that we are continually bridging over to create successful retirement experiences.
When it comes to retirement income planning, Ben, and I know you've done a lot of this along with Seth along the way, but we used to talk about the three-legged stool. Do you remember talking about that, Ben? Where we talk about the three-legged stool of income?
I do.
For clients.
I do.
And so the three-legged stool would be, one leg would be like employer-sponsored defined benefit plans. Boy, does that sound like an ancient dinosaur now. Well, we talk about defined benefit plans. And I remember when I was doing my planning starting off, I happened to be in the Detroit area. And so we'd be talking with people that had very healthy pensions. And they had pensions that lasted for a long time and did very well with them. So that was the first leg of the stool was employer sponsored defined benefit plans where you'd have a pension. The second leg of the stool was more about Social Security. And that's certainly a leg of the stool today, although I think if you've listened to us in the past, you'll realize that there's a lot of concern about the Social Security side of things. But the third leg of the stool was personal responsibility, basically the personal savings that you do a good job of saving to in over the years. And so what we would always talk to people about was having a balance. And we'd always say, well, if you don't have a pension, but you have Social Security in the personal savings, well, there might be a gap there. There might be a problem. So we know with a three-legged stool that if you only have three legs, you want all three legs working for you. And so what we want to talk today is a little bit about how investors feel about retirement, perhaps versus how advisors feel about retirement. We find some very different things that occur, some very different thinkings that occur as far as what's important, what's not important when it comes to this. And when I used to talk with folks about retirement planning, sometimes I talk to people about and use the analogy of a plane. And you think about a pilot on board, and we have a client of ours. We actually have several clients that are pilots, but when it comes to retirement, you're out there, you're working in your engineering firm, you're working for your architectural firm, you're working maybe for an auto body company, whatever it may be. And you may have done a very, very good job in your career of knowing your profession. You're very, very good at it. But when it comes to planning for your retirement, maybe you don't know a whole lot about it. Maybe you've read some about it, you've read a lot of different articles and all, but maybe you don't know a whole lot about it. When it comes to flying a plane, let's say you're flying a plane, you're coming in. Don't you want a pilot that has had a lot of experience over the years? A pilot that have done a ton of takeoffs, a ton of landings. Maybe they've had military experience. I'm thinking of one of the clients that we have right now. This is a wonderful gentleman who for years was a fighter pilot. In and out of Afghanistan, all over the world he was. But, having that experience is so important. If you are out there and you are planning for your retirement, you only have one shot to make it. And all I can tell you is that it's so important to have someone on your side. And we'll talk about really the importance of having an advisor in today's show. That's really what I wanted to emphasize.
Yeah, I think John, you make some good points about that. I think the biggest struggle that people are having in reading this article, it's kind of even more apparent in the statistics that we chatted about and all the different things we went through to accomplish this show, is how many people are afraid. They're afraid of not doing planning, but afraid of what advisor to go to or who to get their advice from and how to differentiate that choice. It's almost like it's like a brick wall they run into and saying, I want help, but I don't know how to get it and make sure I'm getting the right help.
Sure. And what questions do I ask? We're going to go over a survey that was taken that talks about, it's really a survey of two different groups of people. The first group would be individual investors, just people out there that are just like you and me, putting money away every
thousands
every
of
year.
people interviewed. I like this. I really like the
I think we had. We'll go into the specifics, but basically, there's a survey that was conducted of financial advisors and individual investors, and they looked at three basic categories here: retirement outlooks, anticipated savings, monthly retirement income, and length of retirement. They also looked at retirement risks, the factors that have the greatest potential to erode retirement savings, but they also looked at, as well as retirement income advice, the financial planning services that are in demand and could deliver the most value to clients and potential clients. And so the research that we're reading certainly has a clear gap or a significant difference in what investors think versus how advisors actually create a plan for generating retirement income. So let's set up a survey.
That sounds like a huge disconnect.
I mean, there is a
right?
huge disconnect.
I mean,
that's what we're going to see.
You got people saying, hey, I want this, and then the advisor goes off and just does a plan based on what they think.
Yeah, and there's a large gap on that. And bring it back to the plane analogy. We sitting there in our 747 as we're flying along there on our way to wherever we're going. We might have some advice for the pilot, like, "Hey, it seems like you're coming in a little too fast," or "It seems like," but you know what? Do we really have a clue of what we're saying there? And I'm not saying investors don't have a clue, because certainly there's a lot of investors out there that are extremely knowledgeable. But what we're finding is that this gap exists between all income ranges, all wealth levels, and it clearly marks the need for us as advisors to do a good job communicating what we do for a living and how we can help people get to where they want to go.
Well, yeah, some of the research that we were taking a look at was done by In Research, I believe, was the company that did the research here, and it was fascinating to take a look at some of the numbers of the demographics of covered everybody, from income from 50,000 below to 50,000 north to 150, and then kind of north of that, in how some of the that change, the demographic change, what people believe in using advisors, or how to save. And for instance, 43% of respondents currently do use financial advisors, but some of the demographic shifts on this were really had some impact, and taking a look at how people are saving.
Well, one of the things, Seth, that I found interesting, and at least I've found to be kind of an awareness scenario, is reading some of the information about how the shift in the financial world, in the provision of the financial world, caring for clients. And what I mean by that is, everyone used to manage assets, right? That was just kind of the thing. You went to the Merrill Lynch to trade your stocks, and you went to the managed money guy for your managed account. Like, you had different accounts at different places for different things, and you had your 401k and so forth. And it was an asset management scenario. Who's going to manage these assets in the way I want those assets managed the very best? And you would just go to those individual areas of expertise.
Ben, that's a great point. In fact, I remember even not so long ago where when we did our shopping, you know how right now you can go to a super Walmart, which I hate to do, but you go to super Walmart, you can buy stuff on Amazon. But remember in the past how it used to be years ago where you do your shopping maybe one place, you go to the butcher for your meats. You'd go to the cobbler for your shoes to be repaired. Just a whole different way of doing things. And I think today is certainly different as well.
Yeah, and I think on top of the fact that people are looking at the management of specific assets in specific ways and drifting away from that to this more holistic, solution-based approach, kind of how our appetite is for just going to like an Amazon or a Walmart to accomplish a bunch of things all at once, to simplify our needs. And we'll even go to Walmart and buy something a little below grade of what we're looking for just to accomplish getting it done at times.
Yeah.
But then the complexity that's been brought into the space is that it's not only an asset management that the demands for an advisor today or a planner, and there are a difference between an advisor and a planner, it's a full risk management perspective. So people are coming in saying, I want you to manage all my assets. I want you to manage them in a number of balanced distinctions that are offered across the board. And I want you to make sure that my risk is managed as well on top of that while I still want everything. It's almost like I want my cake and eat it too. And that demand on our industry has created large shifts of people who really might just be a specialist, like in one specific area, kind of saying I'm a holistic planner or saying I'm a solution-based person or saying I handle all of these things, but they really only do one or two things well. And that's complicated, right? I mean, one thing I like about working with all the people in our firm is that, we all have things we're better at or stronger at.
Naturally, right.
Right. I mean, that's just kind of your natural drift in almost any domain. But that we have a lot of people to bounce a lot of things off of and use each other's strengths. That's one area where I think, the strength of going to a firm approach is better because even if you're not working with a bunch of people, you're getting firm-based thinking. You're getting groupthink. The groupthink is a big issue in our industry. It's lacking a lot in the individual investment world.
Yeah, part of what you're I'm going to chime in on that with you, Ben, is the experiences that each individual has. As you come to work with a planner, there's your experiences that you have in saving and owning businesses and, working at different companies. And you're bringing that to the table as well as an advisor's experience with the diversity of assets, the diversity of clientele. And then there's, reaching outside of that individual advisor's experience where Ben, John, and myself all have our individual experiences that we bring together as we are planning. So, at some point you bring too many people into the room and it can just kind of get lost altogether, but you bring the right group of people together and you have diversification of skill sets, of knowledge base, of different experience, and that's really what I really like about the groupthink that we can do here in our planning. So interesting things, planning gaps. Let's talk a little bit about some of these planning gaps that we're working through, some of and maybe how we bridge some of those. For instance, one of the numbers that kind of jumps off the page here is how of the people polled that individuals basically in the survey anticipate working longer. From the sample of the group that has already been entered into retirement at approximately age 63, their savings was different than the current group that's working towards retirement and planning on that retirement age being 68, working longer basically to try to accomplish some of the funding goals that they have or the gaps that they have, maybe a need for insurance through an employer. That kind of changes as they enter into the Medicare segment.
But Seth, don't you think too that maybe the aging of first-time parents has a little bit to play into people working longer? Because, when you think about it, when people are having kids when they were 18, 19, 20, coming out of high school as if that was a college time, and you start having
But now
a family.
people are waiting, right? People are waiting until they got their masters and this and that.
Right. I mean, people are having kids in their 40s. So now your kids, they hit 20 years old. You're 60 if you're 40 years old. They're going to college.
Yep.
And so they're 62, 63. And then you have that kind of like, I call it the catch-up years. People are trying to put away as much money as they possibly can to catch up with what they didn't do for retirement.
Yeah, they're still worrying about student loans sometimes. They're worried about, taking care of weddings for their kids, those kind of things.
Right. Yeah, there's a general shift. I was actually looking before we started recording this segment. I was looking for an email from from Kira's grandfather, who's 95, and it was in the email. It was talking about what's happened in the last 100 years, and it was bringing in life expectancy of the average male. I think it was like 55 years old 100 years ago.
At 95, he's really not the foremost knowledge on 100 years of history. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, it was. There's cars. There's the evolution of cars, the evolution of technology,
Amazing.
and the list goes on. But it's hard to believe that in 100 years, what has taken place and how quickly we've gotten here. And health is a big part of that too. As much as we read about in news, different things in health news of what not to eat or what not to put into our bodies or how the environment is affecting us, it's like technology is kind of keeping pace with that and prolonging our life just as much as anything else.
No, that's true. And what's interesting, that brings me into that point of, this area here.
Oh, investors versus advisors, what they feel.
Yeah. Like, the average expected length of retirement by an investor is 22 years.
See, when I hear that 22 years, I think, wow, is that low?
Yeah, I do too.
Because we have to plan for, we don't want people running out of money when they're 87.
Yeah, I mean, we have to plan past life expectancy because, if we get, Seth's wife's grandfather, as a client, and he's 95 and we've planned for,
no signs of slowing down either.
Wow, that's
right.
great.
I mean, that's a real concern.
So investors out there feel like 22 years is what they plan for on average, and we as advisors plan on around 30.
Well, yeah, and I think, I mean, when you look at, I always think we got to make sure we're getting well into the 90s.
Into 100. Isn't that typically what we're looking at? About 100 years old.
And stability with inflation, all those things. And then usually we come to an agreement, like what's your longevity? What's your family history?
Sure.
And usually we add, 5-10% to that.
We have to for prudent planning. So there's different products out there that are designed to help with that.
See, this is the thing people don't understand. And an advisor, in our role, we have to fulfill an unlimited amount, essentially an almost unlimited or unpredictable time period. Like it could be 2 years and, oh, wonderful, you could have spent a lot more money. Or it could be, 40 years and we spent way too much money too soon. We don't have the ability to see that crystal ball. People can say, I only need 20 years of retirement, and they do their own planning and this, that, and the other thing. But we have so much obligation to do right by people and to make sure that they're cared for properly. I'm surprised that number is so low by people.
So also,
there's a 40% difference. Like that's the gap that we take a look at, and by the numbers here, we see approximately a 40% difference between what investor, ourselves included, sometimes in some of the ways that we think around our own retirement. But there's a difference of about 40% that's required to fund the retirement, and what basically we believe is really needed in order to accomplish the goals.
Well, that's
huge.
The one good thing about this is that at least it's not the other way around. Like people expect us to fund 30 years and we're only planning for 22. I mean, that's the good, that's the optimistic side of this, right?
Well, yeah, if there's a bonus to, trying to use advisors and understand what an advisor brings to the table. It's perspective. It's certainly, and that's one part of it. Hey, we're here at Money on Tap. We're talking about bridging the retirement gap. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. You can reach us at info@yourmoneyontap.com or call us at 855-226-8551.
Hi, my name is Seth Crustman, partner with Brayshaw Financial Group and one of the co-hosts of Money on Tap. One of the biggest concerns and largest expenses people face today is taxes. Without thoughtful planning, taxes can destroy future retirement dollars, eliminating the possibility of a timely retirement or dreams of what you want retirement to look like. If you're like most people, you're getting closer and closer to retirement, and you may be wondering if you're taking the right steps. Will my income be enough? Will rising taxes force me to give up my dreams? How does inflation factor into all of this? These are real concerns, and you're not alone. Putting a plan around your financial future is what we do. If you have questions when it comes to your financial security, and if you're looking for a personalized solution, contact us at Brayshaw Financial Group, 855-226-8551. It's time for you to start getting answers to your questions. Headquartered in Bedford, New Hampshire, Brayshaw Financial has offices across the country. We'd love the opportunity to show you how we can help. There's absolutely no cost or obligation to meet with us. Call us at 855-226-8551. 855-226-8551.
Now back to Money on Tap with Ben Brayshaw, John Ryder, and Seth Crustman.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. Today we're talking about bridging the retirement gap and how investors think and how advisors work, and sometimes how there's a big separation in what's really needed to accomplish goals, and how advisors really, it's our job to come alongside and to try to help identify what some of those areas might be that are lacking and create opportunities to get on board and to cover those areas and create successful experiences throughout the retirement planning process.
We were just talking about the gap, essentially,
Sure.
between the expected length of retirement by, an
8-year
investor.
difference.
Yeah,
8-year
8-year
difference,
difference. 22 years with the investor and 30 years with the advisor. This article that this data information that we got from InResearch, the replacement rate of income was really interesting too. So it's a significant disparity between that. So the average investor expected a replacement income of about 65% is what they would need. If you were a $100,000 employee, you expected you needed $65,000 to make it happen. The advisor's at $80,000, at 80%.
Why so much more?
I would say that, most of the time we do planning, we're in the 80 to 100% range for most people. And that's usually without counting Social Security. And, the expectation, I found both of these numbers to be low.
I think old school in the past was, you should be fine. You're not paying as many taxes and all that. You should be fine at 65% of your income. I just don't see that today. With the cost, with inflationary factors, that type of thing, I just don't see it.
I don't see it that way,
range.
especially with the fact and the fear that I have that Social Security is going to be massively impacted and people need to invest. And I think that's why risk management has skyrocketed in these tests, because people realize I can't take the level of risk that 2008 hit me with. I really wanted to enjoy the last, 10 years of growth in the market since that, roughly. But I was too scared to get in way back when, and I've always been scared thinking it's going to pull back any day. And so, I think these numbers are both low. I think you need to prepare for more. And sometimes you can't. But that brings us to that next statistic, which says 46% of people said that in their retirement years, their standard of living was likely to decline.
They expect that, yeah.
They're literally living in that as a reality. That's so sad. That takes me to that next piece, which talks about the standard of living expectations, which is that, check this out, this whole thing, okay? So from basically the increase greatly all the way to the decrease greatly. So the standard of living expectations, John, there was only less than 2% of people thought their standard of living was going to increase greatly.
Right.
About 10 people thought their standard of living would increase slightly. 42%, 43% roughly, stay the same. But everyone else, another 40 some odd percent of people said, hey, listen, my standard of living's going down, and I'm completely aware of that.
Yeah, so what does that mean? Does that mean downsizing? Does that mean...
Well, so are you aware of it, but you can't do anything about it? Like, that's what I'm wondering. Like, is it kind of like a... I hate to use this analogy on some level, but are you a drug addict that just says, I can't quit? Like, are you spending so much you can't live within your means? Are you not making enough money? I'm sure there's a little bit of all of that, but, how much is that? That's the big, that's the $1 million question right there. So...
one thing that this article does a good job of highlighting is the fact that there's many different sources of retirement income. And just 21% of the investors in the survey indicated that they're participating in a defined benefit plan. Why is that? Because the defined benefit plans just don't exist out there anymore. Very, very few out there. And the ones that are out there, as we've talked about in the past, there may be some issues as far as people getting the full benefits that they're expecting.
Yeah, the pension crisis in our country is huge. The people retiring today will tell you, thank goodness I have my pension.
Right.
Thank goodness I have my pension. We hear that so often. But the people who are in the workforce today, they don't have a pension most of the time. And if they do, it's small. It's very, very small. And what are people mostly doing when they meet with us? Asking us for income. They want a pension. They want security in that income and converted from an asset base.
Yeah, in fact, many times we see where people are coming to us with the opportunity for pension buyouts, meaning that they have a choice out there, and they can see from the information they get from their company the fact that they can actually have a pension buyout.
The company wants out too. It's way too much liability.
Yeah, why would they want out? Because they don't want that liability hanging on their books, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
there's a huge difference over the shift over the last 20 years even of what's happened with people and the defined benefit programs. They're just going away. Hardly anybody out there that's employed in the public arena has a pension program out there. It's shifting entirely over to the private investment or the 401k, 403b plans and 76% of the investors today. That's how the contributions are working, and that's how the people are saving. And it's an optional participation.
Different than your grandfather or my grandfather, right? When they had pensions, they just had it. They were contributed to by the company, and they retired at their 59 years old, or 60 years old, or 65.
I think for people listening to this today, I think what's going on in our culture, what's happening in our community, is that when you used to go to a financial planner, it was because you were rich and you just had so much money outside of it. But otherwise, everyone else worked inside their 401k or whatever they was offered at work, and they dealt with the management company over that, and that whole process was pretty standard. Like they had access and resources to things. That's still true to some extent. But the thing is when people had a little bit of a 401k, they also had a little bit of a pension, and so there was like this kind of overarching. I've got a couple things going on. Now our culture's really shifted to everything is on the employee. No one wants the liability. What's all this fiduciary stuff that everyone's talking about? Like, what is that all about? That's all about liability. That's what the conversation is. Who's responsible? And everybody's trying to push that back to Joe the investor, just the average guy who's trying to figure out how to work, pay the bills, feed his kids, get the mortgage covered on time, save enough for retirement, and be able to retire. And they don't know what to do. And so now they're saying to themselves, I need some help. And they're literally standing there afraid, not knowing where to turn. That is a culture shift we're in the middle of right now, trying to figure out how to help people, how to communicate that stuff.
I want to switch gears here just a little bit and talk about financial concerns in retirement. advisors feel one way about some of these concerns. Many are similar, but advisors feel differently sometimes than investors as far as what's most important. We talked about that earlier. We feel like having longevity in planning is really, really important. We've talked about how having more income as opposed to less income is really, really important. But let's talk a little bit about what the survey is indicating as far as when it comes to different concerns in retirement. Do you know when it comes to investors, their largest issue, the biggest concern for them would be medical expenses? And you know what? That totally makes sense. I totally get that.
But for the advisor, the biggest concern is longevity.
Yeah, because we know that we have to keep that money coming, don't we?
Yeah, it's an obligation that we're signing up for.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
Yep. Other issues that investors out there feel is a big deal are health insurance premiums. 31% feel that health insurance premiums are just a huge, huge concern for them. And boy, look at what has happened in our country when it comes to health insurance premiums and how expensive it's all gotten.
I mean, and that's still, I mean, that debate's not over in our country, right? I mean, we're still debating it on a daily basis in the government. I mean, that's a constant moving target.
And all three of us here at the microphones have all experienced clients that really could afford to retire, but because they can't take care of the health insurance premiums, they decide to stay on longer because they really want to be protected by the company plan.
What's interesting about this data here is that the second largest, so medical expenses was number 2 for the financial side, but the advisor's number 3 was actually the cost of long-term care.
Sure.
Now, you know, what I think I would translate that into is, as an advisor, as a planner, sitting here saying, why would that be number 3? It has nothing to do with caring for the person who's ill. It has to do with caring for the person who's going to be remaining.
We never think of it that way, do we? But as advisors, we need to.
Right. I mean, it's all about protecting enough assets so that the person who survives the other spouse has enough to live on. That is a huge, huge concern on the planning side.
And there's a lot of planning that we can do around that when it comes to trusts and making sure that people's estate planning is in play to help protect those assets.
You know, some of the supervision work that we do and the auditing work that we do on the other end of our practice, you know, has really exposed, you know, all of us to a lot of experiences that say, wow, look what happened to that person. And some, I mean, I've seen people that have just gone completely bankrupt because of long-term care because they didn't want to do anything and they could have, knowing the facts, knowing the background of all that stuff.
On the flip side of that, we've also seen where people were well protected, meaning having a good insurance policy in place that really takes care of them. But I remember you not too long ago telling me about a client who had put some money into a life insurance policy with a rider on it, some kind of a rider. And that rider, he had a heart attack not long after he purchased the policy. He only put a year or so of premiums in, and he came back with a great benefit that helped him when he went through that.
Yeah, they paid like 2 years. He had a heart attack, and they gave him 73% of the death benefit on the life insurance side.
What a huge help!
As a lump sum check.
What a huge help!
It was phenomenal.
Yeah,
it was phenomenal. He couldn't. They could not believe it. Yeah. They really couldn't believe it. They had actually forgotten that feature was available on that program.
Yeah, they had it, but they forgot they had it.
They knew it had the long-term care piece, but they didn't know how the other ones.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think those are some interesting things. I think the only other thing I want to highlight out of this data is, you know, there was like 3 reasons that 75% of this population sit down essentially with an advisor. All right. And I thought this was interesting because out of everything, out of the entire percentage base, I think it was like only 18% of people would say, I'm a do-it-yourselfer. So out of all the do-it-yourselfers, 18% said, I'm never using anybody.
Sure.
Okay. So that was interesting to me. So roughly 80% of this population, this demographic here that was chosen, they said, you know what? I would work with somebody. And the following reasons: to develop a retirement plan or financial plan, something along those lines, financial guidance for transitioning to retirement, or just general investment advice. I thought those, you know, looking at all the different pieces and where they broke down all the percentages, that's simply the biggest stuff. But I mean, like small items were like after the death of a spouse, like less than 5%. You know, there's like all these little triggers that would cause people to say, yeah, I would do this, or I would do that, or I would do this. when I think about that, say 80% of people are considering an advisor on some level, that tells you that there's this huge group of people out there that are saying, I want help. I would actually choose to have help if I could find the right person or get the right answers or feel like I could find the resolution I need. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, I've sat with people where I have spent hours and hours and hours, literally multiple meetings, learning about them, trying to understand their concerns, their woes, their fears, their desires, all of those individual pieces, building retirement plans for people and so forth. And I've sat down with them and presented a plan, and they're like, yeah, that's not me. I literally have had that happen. So I've had the breakdown. I've had that gap occur, and I've narrowed it down to one of two things. Either I didn't hear them or they didn't tell me the truth. And what I do find a lot of the time is that people, they're not really honest with themselves, even though they think they're being honest with themselves, and don't share with us well. They don't give us the core reality that they're not living within their means, or they're not doing this, or they didn't do that. Or, there's a real need for transparency in this process. And that's the only encouragement I would offer people that are listening today is to really open up.
Ben, if you're going to the doctors and you're not telling him what the problem is, there's a problem. If you're not giving him the truth about what's going on, whether it be with your diet or what it may be, then you're not going to get a good analysis and a good solution.
Yeah. Yeah, great stuff, you guys. The other piece that I was going to say I thought was interesting was that 45% of the advisors that were polled don't factor healthcare or medical into the planning for the clients. And we've spent quite a bit of time talking about how significant that piece is, long-term care.
Too.
What's that?
I saw that too. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it was shocking to me. I was like, well, that's a huge part of planning and what we do. And, in taking a look, if you're either finding that, okay, you haven't received any advice there, try to find somebody. Sometimes it's a specialist that might come alongside of those other advisors and they work in tandem with them. But for the most part, that's a really critical part of planning and the longevity of a plan and the success of a plan, as well as if you're in that market for and realizing that, I'd like to start working with an advisor and trying to find the right fit. Sometimes we find that we're kind of in that pool with, hey, we've got to get some bids out there. We've got to get some understanding around our roof. Let's just use that as an example and what that project's going to look. And you're going to have chocolate, vanilla, strawberry all the time. Right. Try to understand what your options are. Make qualified and educated decisions in this process. You know what? We're glad if we have an opportunity to come alongside you, to work with you and at least participate in that process with you at Brayshaw Financial Group. This has been a lot of fun today, you guys, bridging this retirement gap and trying to build some successful outcomes for people so that they can have confidence moving forward with what they're doing today. That's what it boils down to, is what are we doing today, right now, to build successful experiences. And this has been a lot of fun moving through this piece with you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Seth.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.